which is unusual because the times used to be thought of as uppity and this and that. But now as you look through certain,
Yes.
but for me, it's not what to do as much as it illuminates what you are doing already. You know, so it's it's not a following. Again, it's the religious being who has a freedom at their core. And the religion then that has a motive that's organized. They can't say it's wrong or right, but it's organized towards, in time, this will happen for you. And but the religious being feels confined in the religion. And they have to hide their true selves in some way, or their true feelings or whatever, because the feelings interfere with the literalness of the story. So you see that almost all of it is missing a heartfelt conversation, an honest conversation. And so in that, throughout the life, there's a who am I question that runs through it. And the who am I question exists on many levels. You can say, who am I? I'm French, or I'm this, or I'm Catholic, or Christian, or whatever. You can give yourself identities around these circumstances. And especially if they're tribal identities, then they evoke a commonality. But still, if it was organized within that, you see that there's always been a hidden self, a quiet self that spoke to friends or by accident, but was not part of the literal sense. So you see that all these are aspects of you. When they determine all of you, when being French determines everything about you, and all you do is French and say "lou la la" and act French and put out French and act clothes and make French food when someone visits and walks down the street. You want to try that? Complete French?
I've already done that. I think.
You have done. You have.
I think I have done.
French person. Let me see what a complete French woman looks like.
Oh, I don't know about looking at my age. I don't know.
Let's say Isabelle Huppert. Can you do her then? Okay. So let's say it can be that one then assumes an identity historically. And I read where politically there's a big upheaval now. This young boy shot so many people up there in Buffalo, New York.
Yes.
And that the white race is being eliminated as being conceptualized very strongly. And but then I was also reading where that England didn't consider the Irish to be white.
What? I didn't know that.
Well, there was Irish Catholics, and the Irish Catholics were considered to be, they were starving them with potato famines and you know, and these fights have been going on. So then you start to look into the story I was just reading a little bit here and there, you know, and it's like taking a walk around the story.
Yeah.
And seeing what it looked like, and then seeing what the theories were and everything like that. Okay. And you start to see a kind of, in order to see, you're kind of in it, but not of it. That seeing has somehow, the of it part of it organizes you into a way of seeing and living.
Yeah.
But when one is introduced into the context from a different place, invited, a love affair invites you into that context, you visit it from a different place, not from the history, but from the mystery. So for you, it looks like a history. To the people in it is a history. You look at it and you see the mystery running through the story. You see the threads, you see the individuality, you see the dynamics. You see it as a creative act. And you can also see the inherent experiences waiting in the literal, as there's a literal family and a creative family that's changing all the time, going different places and evolving. And so you see experiences that are waiting inherently in the form. And you see that may even be fights in order to be free to have the experience or whatever. So you see almost inherently in the form is that when in the bird's nest, when the bird comes and it flies away. And so you see that also in your own life. But what we were mentioning before is where you see that somehow there was in the meeting or somehow in the relationships, there was a kind of baby waiting in the story before that had the dimensions of but then it was the correct person, almost as if there's someone in you or in us that can kind of sniff and feel and look and see and kind of compose alchemically. And then what looks like literal relationships almost seems to be creations. But if there is an underlying premise where you're a human being who happens to be French, so you're not dominated by French where you have to eat that thing or you have to do that. If you still you are a person who is French. So somehow you have touch with the humanity in the story.
Yeah.
And in that is very much like the acting school concept of you become aware, you change your life from karma to dharma by seeing that it was more of a movie. Perceptively, you then go, that allows you then to assume identities in the story. Because life has then been transformed to a movie. You see that it is not stagnant life, it is flux. It has always been moving. And you can find any scientist, any mystic, any kind of circumstance to show you when you become aware of the movement. Generally, you then see the picture not from literally being in it any longer, but you see it from a different place. And you see that what looked like a literal event taking place, you see was in flux. There was a larger picture. And in relationships, simple acts, accidental meetings or whatever, reveal so many dimensions hidden in plain sight. And so you see the mysticism, the natural, the everyday, the boring, the creative, all of them are inherently in the circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing, Ursula, then with your...
I saw last night a documentary. It was UNICEF, I don't know, it's for children in the world. And to see what's happening in some part of the world to kids, it was like heart-rending. I can't believe in our day and age that kids have to do what they are doing, you know, working in factories in some Bangladesh. Or, I don't know, I don't want to put a temper, but it's like it's so overwhelming sometimes.
Especially from the helplessness.
Yes.
As if okay, the doer is not in the story, and then you're exposed to a kind of human condition.
But it sure makes me reflect on my own.
But well, it's not that you say should or shouldn't be. You see, it is somehow. How come you know that this should not be happening and they don't know that? All these people are in charge and this and that. How come they don't know what you know from 1 second looking at it? Are you guys crazy? Stop the shit, you could say. Just stop the shit. Don't make up stories that you have to do this and you have to do oil and gasoline and whatever the crap you're talking about. And Nazis and Jews and conspiracies and mother jumpers. And just look at the picture and see what Urja sees. And then you can do like that. You know what that means. What the? So how come it's capable that if you look at it and you cry in your helplessness, and these guys are so educated and so developed and so scientifically on the ball, and how come they can't see what you simply see? What makes you cry? What makes you throw up? What makes you want to leave the room? What makes you, and yet it's normal. And they can explain it to you. Because of this and that, because this will happen, okay. I say, oh, I understand now. And then you shot them in the supermarket because the larger picture is that the white people are being eliminated through the, and I say, yeah, if I do turn on the TV or something, man, especially entertainment, you see all kinds of weird shit now that didn't exist before, and different shapes of people that before was this. Now the body's cool and it could be anything. So it is being released. So if I'm a lonely dude somewhere and I'm becoming, and there's not much happening, and it's also true. And then the other stories about the teeth being misaligned and and a few other things. So then you say, okay, I don't see that it's, as I'm walking through it, then I'm coming also from a different place. I'm coming from where I am then into the literal story. So to what extent the literal story is real, they could say, look, there may be a fire here tonight. You have to think about it and be prepared maybe, but there's smoke coming and it's all around us. And I say, okay, let me figure literally, because we're naturally lazy kind of people and you want to start everything and okay. At the same time, we're not crazy. So, okay, so then we understand. It just gives us a hint of where we are, where we're in it, but we're not of it. So there's part of us that is literal, that is coming from a literal education, but it's not the only way to be. There's also parts of us that would look in that world as a kind of art form. It looks like intuition and other forms. But they're actually, if you look through science, you see they were the basis of science. They were the basis of Newtonian logic and Einsteinian discovery or whatever. With dreams and thoughts and failures of circumstance and looking into it. And okay. And so, but you also then understood a world in flux and a life in flux. And so somehow when circumstance takes you out of the literal picture, you then start to see a world unfolding because you're kind of out of the picture in a literal way. And when you see that flux in a larger picture, you see something holy from the larger picture, but as you literalize it, come close to the situation, you see that it doesn't know thyself somehow. It is if you were flying overhead to see the human race, to see the story would be a thing of beauty happening. But then if you landed on the ground, it wouldn't be so beautiful. Its beauty would be captured by other literal motives and other effects. So flying overhead, you would be subject to the purity of it. And the literalization would be, it wouldn't be literalization to you. You would see flux taking place. Something's dying, something's being born from that. You would see the energy. But then when you came to the little ground zero, then you would see a population that you would be a stranger in a strange land because you come from a mystery. You come from outer space into the moment. So your history is not the same, and they come from a history where they think they're French, or they think they're this, or they think they're having a fight with the people down the block from 1,000 years ago because Jesus did that to them. So this history is in there, literally in this story. But then the stranger in a strange land walks through the neighborhood where that history is not the dominant factor, and it's a human experience. And they may meet then others who are also having a human experience while they're in the literal story. But generally, the human experience has to be hidden when there is an outrageousness around it. So when when there are circumstances that are happening now where to be human, you have to hide your humanity because you would not take sides, or you couldn't do this, or you couldn't kill something. But you saw a hurt that ran through the story, and that the hurt would manifest itself historically. And it would be around who did this to who 300 years ago, and that one said this to that one, like, and this belongs to them, and whatever story they made up. And the literal ownership of the circumstance, when obviously everything's in flux and changing all the time. So let's say you see but you see beyond the literalness. You see the hurt is inherently in the story. So it's not only associated with the event is a reflection of something that had been happening all the time. And it would be even akin in the family where the child wants to leave or something like that, and the parents are afraid they want to leave, and this, or they block it, or sometimes it's real reasons, sometimes it's fear of being alone. So you start to see all the mechanics that run through the story when it's not just literally a happening, but the things that are happening will happen anyway. But the echo effect that runs through the story leaves a history in the mystery. So how are you doing now with the circumstance that's happening for you? Lara is staying for a while?
Oh, Lara is gone. She's left a little before Mother's Day. And it was a wonderful short visit. She's getting very good at sculpting hair. She gave me a haircut, because she can't afford for herself, so she's learning with a woman online how to do it, and she's really getting good.
Remember the movie Breathless?
Yes.
Well, remember the woman who played in the American woman?
Yes.
Well, she had the haircut that was called the pixie.
Pixie, yes.
And at that time, when that movie came out, women were wearing, especially European women coming over or whatever. I remember a Hungarian woman that I knew at the time also had a pixie haircut, and they all came from that movie.
Yeah.
And now your hair looks like the pixie now too. The pixie cut. Well, what do you say? Is anyone on?
No one has said hello, but apparently we have 2 people watching.
Okay, so well, it's pretty for us shooting the breeze then. What do you think? Is that okay?
Yes.
I think that Spiro is setting up some podcast or something at the Mary's Minetta place there that we may do. So it's still new to me, but it's we'll see where it goes.
Jimmy just said hi.
Oh, hi. So was there anything that came up that you wanted to explore at all, or it was just this flying over the dying and living process as normal?
Yes, and you still, I don't know, it seems that the grief seems to go deeper, but not damaging, but
well, let's say you have the whole body of experience because you're seeing what people will avoid. So you understand that in order to continue, there is an avoidance factor, what looks like an avoidance factor. It's a remarkably complex factor of continuity where one is somehow storing and shelving and forgetting a lot of incidents in order to survive, in order to carry on, but one still carries them, not as literal incidents, but as moments of reflection or shift or change. So what looks like the past is also parallel. And not only parallel in one's thought process or whatever, but somehow one finds a thought process and then you start to see, as soon as you think of something, you start to see its name mentioned on the television or something mentioned here or something pops up. that is extremely similar to what you've just been seeing accidentally or whatever, and you
Yeah.
start to become aware of a parallel movement. They're not the same as a literal life, but you do see things that release the literal life. That's what I mentioned. You see something, and holy shit, it sends you back 65 years ago where you saw something with your father, and you realize you never met the guy. You just met the story. Any stranger could have met him in 5 minutes. And so something awakens in you, and you see they were just people doing their version of parents. The literalness of the story, you see the mystery in the history, that people will literalize their life around the history. But when you fly overhead and you meet it, you see the mystery inherently in the history. And so when one becomes aware of that parallel movement, there is something that awakens in one that kind of is pure in relationship to the life becomes an art form.
Mm-hmm.
The story is released from the literalness. And what happens? You see that the literal self is built to survive. So it has a literal family and a literal country and a literal identity, and it literalizes its life. But there are parallel elements that are running alongside it. So an event happens, a mistake happens, some rupture happens that forces a kind of soul searching or to look at one's life from a different place. And once it's interrupted, one is given that interruptus creates something mentally that allows you to see something that was hidden in plain sight. Now, usually we'll try to incorporate that and have that into our life. But when it opens up a passage deep enough, your life somehow is around that reflection that just awakened. You see that there's another dimension in the life that you're living. And that people and scientists and this or whatever religious beings have attempted to locate this flux. But you also see that you had to be in a space yourself to be with it. And it was almost like you were learning music, and then music then introduced you to a whole other dynamic. And there was failure, success, failure, all of them were elements of an experience. But when they were elements of an experience, you became aware that there was whether it was music, whether it was this or whether it was that, whether you were writing, you became aware of a parallel existence. And as you explored it further, that parallel existence started to become very much your own existence around that expression of form. And the main element in it was one is free. Now, the logical ideas of freedom is an ownership of the self, but then you see, no, one is free in the art form. And I say, well, what does freedom mean in the art form? And I say, it means that I'm free to explore this form and to be with it and to see where it is. And so that's why I see in the color field school that they were able to find 100 colors in each color.
Mm.
And that there was no permanence. There was only permanence if you walked by. And it was white, and it was black, and it was red if you walked by. But if you looked at it and explored it, you started to see molecular nature of something, the thing in flux. You started to see permanence, non-permanence. And in the looking at it, color was only an aspect of what you saw. But if you only walked past it, color was the only thing you saw. But if you looked at it, then you saw the creation of the colors had their own movements. And you see the application of different forms and different colors to have the depth of one color. And when you see the processes, you see the processes also in life. It's an attempt to have a snapshot of life from another perspective, where there's depth in it. Hmm? But the depth usually requires an interruption that sometimes is a crisis to the person. because there's a kind of undertone of soul searching, not only solving a problem, but a soul searching element to it.
Yes.
Because you discover at that point, you don't have to do what you're doing. You're not in a have to circumstance. You see that somehow your life is yours too, and not in a greedy sense or ego sense, but in a sense again of caring for a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And you become that baby, and you kind of meet an original love affair that has somehow been with you all this time.
Mm.
Understand, but it should have left you a long time ago. So our body should have said, I'm getting the hell out of here a long time ago. So let's say you had a partner that has hung around for quite a while,
Yes.
and it doesn't know it's French, and it doesn't know literally what identity it has. It's kind of dependent on you. It's pretty nice. Let me see if I can. So, can you be with somehow an affectionate? Well, they're trying to do that in show business now, aren't they? Where they're celebrating the body and this and that. But so the literalization has a motive, but the experience that one has had a creative existence all along, that in fact is more has more depth than the literal existence of one's thoughts.
Yeah.
And that something opens up in you that includes a view of you that is not based on the ego sense of continuity or something. It's more like you're walking past a camera that's there, and then you see the camera picture and you say, holy shit. And like, you know, so it reveals something that was hidden in plain sight. And once it's revealed, change is in the perception, not so much to do.
Yeah.
So it does seem for me what you were describing, and also the invitation for a retreat up there in Boulder or something. Let's
Yeah.
see. Well, again, thanks very much. Let's see how that unfolds. Or
Yeah, and
makes sense.
we totally understand, how it could be physically demanding to come and.
I don't know. I feel I could fly up there. I'm pretty flexible in that way. Although I do feel dying is in the picture pretty much. It's not so much literal, like heart attack dying, or maybe I am putting off getting a checkup, and there's some hints of something returning, whatever. But they said, why not do it now? You avoid. I said, this month I've kept open because some major things may be happening, flying overhead. And I wouldn't want some tubes in me or be in a hospital or something when that's happening. So, and I said, why? And I said, there's something in the philosophical framework of friendship, of being there for a moment with each other. And it's not spelled out. But it is when it's violated, when that becomes a dumb idea. And I say, why? I say, although I would not want to fail you in that.
You,
If you said to me, Danny, you dirty rat bastard, I'm going to kill you. I wouldn't mind being heavy. Everybody's pretty heavy too, so I wouldn't mind being. So I have a promise to be there. But if that's a joke to the person, I wouldn't mind being relieved. Because that phase that we're talking about, even though we have created a kind of humor of normalcy, we're sharing dying.
yeah.
And it's not the dying of screaming, cranky. It's the dying of observation while you're living. And as you're more leaning towards dying than the living, now when you see that others see you without knowing that you are living also, they see you as just dying. Okay. So then if I see you as just dying and I walk past you, I say, well, hi, how's everything? I'll catch you later. Okay. A dying older lady like that sitting on the bench is not that, you're going to get in trouble if you sit and talk to them. So let's say dying becomes part of the venue that you're in some way, and you see some of the relationships that you have are talking as if they're talking to a dying person who happens to be a person. And that's me. And I say, holy shit, because I still feel I'm living in it. Okay. But not that I'm demanding to live, or I want to live, or I'm forcing to live, or I will try to live longer, or I'll think. Longer doesn't seem to be the question. Longer seems to be a byproduct of something else. And that is, if there's something genuine happening for you, then time is shifted. Whether it's 1 minute, 1 year, 10 years, time isn't measured that way. It's the fulfillment of the expression.
But it's like an alternative of feeling wet less sometimes. You know, everything is like, I feel like everything is getting lighter, and other time it's, ooh.
But you also have a, well, you're doing still Pilates now. Are you going back?
Yes.
You've gone back to the machine also?
No, not the machine.
No, just the movements there.
Yes.
So how is that?
Oh, it's okay. But I've been worried about the fire in Santa Fe.
We are worried about the fires here, but it also seems to be a beautiful day. They say tonight, be careful. And with the smoke and things like that. But basically, it's burning all around us. There's a huge fire around us, and some smaller ones to the left and right of us. So
That's been going on for a few weeks, hasn't it?
it's been going on for a few weeks, and it's, I think, 300,000 acres, they said.
Wow.
And I think that they figure 1,500 homes will be destroyed. So, well, the governor said that. Is that happening up there in Colorado also?
No, not right now.
And yet, I just saw Segway walk past with a wheelbarrow out there. Brenda's coming in there after being in the garden for a while, and
I've been gardening a lot.
then they're going to work. And no, everyone's working hard and intensely doing what they're doing. You know what I mean? But how's the air out there, Brenda?
Not bad today.
Not bad today. Do you see any clouds out there? Okay, so it seems doable. I'm reading a book for you, Urja, and also maybe Derek. I did mention it to you before. There are places in the world where rules are less important than kindness.
Oh, I like the title.
And other thoughts on physics, philosophy in the world. So that's that Carlo Rovelli that I mentioned. He had a few other books, but he's a sweet. He mixtures. He's kind of able to black holes, to Buddhism, to climate change, to alchemy, to love and its effect, and so he's pretty brilliant. But he's also quite achieved character out there, and he's got his own academies where they explore these alternate worlds and situations. But he's a sweetheart of a guy, seemingly.
What's his last name?
Rovelli.
Rovelli?
Rovelli, Carlo Rovelli.
Okay, thanks.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't even see him online, I guess. But again, what I'm doing with things is that I stumble upon things, or I read something, and it allows me a kind of, it opens up something that I'm doing anyway, where it's inherent physics that you're in. You're inherently in the scientific moment, the creative moment. All of these are happening, and you experience aspects of it. So that's why I say sometimes it's magical thinking.
Yes.
I say if it's magical thinking because you became aware of a magical aspect of your living, that everyone then who looks at the body thinks it's normal. But then when you look at it, you see, holy shit, that this cooperation is taking place in the body like that. And you only learn about it when you get sick or something happens. But then when you have to look into it and you say, oh, I've been taking a kind of remarkable creative thing happening as normal. And the body says, look at me. You know, like the baby says, look at me. Okay. And then you stop and you see something. You say, holy shit, it has been a cooperative, your life, not you alone. But there is a quest, there is a journey that is going on. The body seems to inherently know some elements of the journey that you have yet to find out. But the journey is happening whether you find out or not. But there are elements that you become aware that there's another dimension happening in your life than what you think is happening, than literally you. And something happens that forces you, it's called meditation or this, but it just forces you. Then you get caught up in meditation and ritualizing it, but independent of that, it was something forces you to deeply look at something, and then you see the whole continuity was based on avoidance, which is not a flaw. It's a flaw if, in fact, your freedom of existence is taken over by a prior predisposition of survival. So then when you see something deeply, then survival is not the only medium that's important. Survival surrenders to other dimensions in life. And then you see the continuity is not only around your existence, but to explore relationship somehow opens up doorways perceptively in time. That even a conversation interrupts the literal.
Yeah.
And you see other time zones that are there in memory then. So once you perceive that, you see there's a creative dimension happening in your life, but it's also based on you discovering it. It's coexisting, but an event forces a sensitivity enough in one to look without a result, without an ownership of the story. But it's couched in a who am I question. What is going on? Who am I? When it is deeply interrupted, then one is kind of deeply focused in a different way. Not to accomplish something, not to achieve something, but to meet your own being. And when you meet your own being, it won't accept bullshit. Because it sees, it's been in the story all along. And it has a relationship with you. And even though it's been silent, there's an echo effect of running through the story. As you explore, the you is no longer literally you as you, historically you. But then you start to see dimensions in the you, that the identity is assumed, the literalness, but you see one's life is in fact a creative act. And as it exists in form and time and space, then it's like an artwork that exists in time and space. But after everyone passes, there still may be a relationship to the art. So then after the life passes, there still may be a relationship to the memory, to the feeling, to the shared thing, to the story, where the body's not in the way. And there is a dialogue in the absence. Now, I'm just exploring this element, and it seems to be obviously part of the everyday situation that I'm in, where I exist and don't exist simultaneously. And in the shared space, it seems that there are funny moments. There's some tough moments coming, we'll see. And so the being there was not so much doing this or doing that, but was being there for that somehow it had to invite you into the story. That you had no role unless it invited you into the story, and okay, in one way or another. And then you were playing with "Hey baby" moment. Nice to see you, hey baby, or you dirty rat mother. Okay. Okay. Now you sure you feel cool with what's happening then with Stephen and Laura?
Yes, yes, it has been really sweet. This Sunday, I'm going to be meeting his sister. His sister is coming to visit with her husband. And he was raised partly by her when he was a little
Who
kid.
was this?
The sister of Stephen.
Oh, I see. So you're entering into the story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just tip-it-o. Tip-it-o.
Well, it seems when you enter into the story, then you discover very quickly that people are simply people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you discover the weirdness. And what is the weirdness? All of a sudden, people you knew that were regular people, all of a sudden are famous or this or that or saying this. Okay. And you say, holy shit, there's a holy shit happening out there. Okay. And I say, why? And I say, because if they called on you, it's because they're in trouble. Now, they may be cool and they may not be cool and they may be this and they may be that. But your presence is kind of demanding that it be real, that there be no bullshit. But you see bullshit flying over the head there. Who did my mother? So now, okay, you're going to go into the story. I may have to say goodbye to you for a while, for a couple of years then. What do you think? You want to fly into the story, literal story? No, I'm saying.
No, it's just that I kind of.
If you feel it speaks, I'm with
Yes,
you.
it does.
I'm with you on that. If you feel it speaks to you.
I am touched. I'm really touched. I feel touched by. I can't give a concrete reason for it, but it's yes, someone, a human being, but also passionate about not being above, but being in touch and being humble at the same time. I thought that was sweet. The humbleness.
What do you think, Derek? You believe her?
Sounds like a valid story to me.
A ballad, you said? What is it?
Valid. Sounds valid to me.
Oh, do I have this plugged in? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you sure now? Let me look at her face there. Sure, we'll just trust your judgment there. Now, but then Lara is coming back and forth. Is that how she's doing?
Well, I'm supposed to go visit her this summer. She might be coming back at some point, I don't know, but it has been raining every single day she's been in Portland.
Okay, so it sounds pretty nice. So let's see what next month looks like then.
Yes, Danny.
Or maybe you all come down here and we'll see how that unfolds. What do you think?
Yes.
But you think you have a trio going?
A tree.
Do you? You feel like you have...
Well, I mean, I think Lara would like to see you. She hasn't seen you in a long time. And I think Stevens would like you to.
Well, if you'd like to explore the phenomena of attraction and repulsion.
Yes.
And what it means, and inherent in a the same relationship, that can be both element, where attraction seems to create something and then repulsion seems to break it immediately. And there also seems to be correct reading. And the correct reading is not only about the social aspect of living together, the reading is creatively living together. Whenever, in fact, it's not shared, the feeling, but the feeling is there in one and not shared in the other, then you find you enter into the world from a very different place. And
You
that's
say
why I
when
get around when I say, if Mary said, hey, baby, why don't you hang around? That little dopey, hey, baby, if they mean it deeply or soulfully, actually creates time from a different place. The person can, you'll see, you'll even be in memory, in absence. And so you see it's deep enough. So when you see that there's an invitation that is even in memory, I'll be with you or something like that, then you can see that the body also hangs around. So you're finding dimensions that are what were thought to be naive or crazy, but then you're finding a real science in it. That somehow your body experience seen from a different place, because you discover that there are 4 or 5 or 100 other dimensions happening for you physically while you're literally living in your life, and you think that's the only thing that's happening. And then you kind of understand that as you experience something, it radiates in your body and then it touches someone else. And so you see there are conversations going on that one only has a glimpse of. So they say, I think, yeah, it's okay. And but you understand that somehow there's a shared space that's no longer literally individualized. And it's around let me look at it with binoculars now. What is it around?
it's not logical, it's not rational.
It is very logical.
Is it?
Yes. One is hanging around for a love affair in some way, not predictable to the mind, and not part of the trip. So somehow you're creating something, and I'm kind of forcing you to keep it pure, no shtick, because there is something deeply happening then, but they're also full of shit at the same time. So you're bringing them all on board around something deep that's happening, and you'll postpone your death in order to be there for them. But they kind of have to understand that you're postponing your death in order to do something with them. You wouldn't mind passing away next week, okay? But you'll hang around with something with Laura and him if, in fact, they're also serious with it. Okay?
Yeah, and
You want the
that young,
job? You want the job?
I met through Stephen that young woman Dara, who was who were born in the cult, and I was really deeply touched by what she went through, what she's going through, and it feels good to give her some hey baby.
Okay, but you mean it becomes organized into the story. When the meeting what you're saying is that there is something happening with you and Laura and Stephen where you're on the same page when you're sitting on the same couch.
Yes.
Where you're somehow, even though they're different, everybody has their own life. Somehow when you're meeting, you're on the same page about something. And
Yes.
that means that the hurts and there are other things that that brought them to the moment are not dominating the moment. So let's say you're meeting people who the hurt got them to meet you, but now they can't bring the hurt into the meeting you. So somehow the meeting you, just like you have a hurt, if you want to go back and you say, yeah, my father did this, my uncle did that, that's what happened. Okay. So, but then you also understand that something happened to you that shifted the story where the psyche, you see the dominance of the psyche is to continue. So then you see that it then meets relationship as a form of continuity. But you are inviting it where it is not dominated by a history. Where its history was only one part of it. In fact, its history from another look at this life, the hurt that is experienced in life will be a dynamic from another place. Because somehow it freed the story. And so that's what the hurt is, that the person can't take being freed from the little stories, like being an outcast now. But again, another dimension that you bring to it is more of a stranger from a strange land, that the person came not from the being dominated by a history, but they walk into a story from a different place, really deeply interested in it and exploring it. So there are dimensions of life for the people who meet you yet to be explored. But somehow the hurt is a possessive and it has power. So you'll see that somehow in relationship, it must be surrendered, not by some trick or anything like that, but in relationship, you see you don't own the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you see the history that allowed you to survive is now the mystery that allows you to love or feel with no motive. And then you see in the literal world, motives drive the story.
Yeah.
In the creative world, a kind of truth drives the story. And the truth, again, is not literally laid out that way, like a newspaper or something like that. It is that you see the threads that run through your life. Sometimes you have access to it. But no matter how much you trick it to see it by
Yeah.
this form, that form, somehow it has to be, the next stage is kind of, it has to be true.
Yeah.
To have access to it. You see, it's no longer coming from a history.
But
So then
yeah,
you see when it's no longer being driven by history, there's a kind of health in seeing.
it's
We're seeing is not a possessive. So then you meet things that have been there all along, voices that speak, of perceptions that come. But it's part of a process that you're in now, but you have access to only when something happens to you. So you see that somehow there's a sorrow in your girl.
yes.
And somehow you see this old dude, there's a sorrow in this old dude. You happen to stumble in the room to make some breakfast or something, and you see sorrow, 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 sorrow running to. And it's in the form of lonely, 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 lonely. So they try to get rid of sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. But the sorrow is deeper than the lonely. So even if they interrupt it by getting stoned or doing whatever they do, it only interrupts it for a moment. The sorrow is not some false force. It is a force. It's not sorrow about something. It is a space itself for one to explore it. For one to explore it, the sorrow hides the other side of the picture that one is trying to figure out what it is. But it's blocked by a place where the mind can't go. The mind runs into its history when it explores that. Something must change in it for to see its coexistence, to see its parallel lives. But to see that the life doesn't belong to you as a possessive, but perceptively you're caring for it, changes time and space from where I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope that's too not
Thank you,
too
Danny.
movie-like, but I think this is happening actually at the same time the everyday is happening. And you heard the juicer just then. It's a heavy juice they drink. Okay, I'll see everyone. Take care. And thanks for putting us on today, Kai.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Take care.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.